Today, September 16th, 2020, I, Maya Hill, the interviewer, will be interviewing Miss Meryl Lynn Brown, location Zoom. This oral history will be for the Black Student Alumni Oral History Project. So welcome, Miss Meryl. Thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed for this project. So just to jump right in, will you just share where you're from and where you were born, when you were born, and where you were from?
Hi, Maya. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I've been here I've been different places, but I was born in Philly, moved to DC, Silver Spring, State College. I'm trying to think. And I guess that's it. And back to Philadelphia.
Okay. So. What year were you born?
1949, but I don't look it.
Yeah, not at all, not at all. So as growing up in Philly, where did you grow up in Philly? Like, what part of Philly did you grow up in? Can you tell us about your parents, what they did, if they had an occupation or if they went to school? Just a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I grew up in North Philly. I lived in North Philly the whole time. My father was a funeral director. So at first he wasn't. He was going to school, mortuary school, and he was working full time. So he had a crazy busy schedule. And so he had a business. One thing I remember about growing up is we always had a Cadillac because he had a business, and so people were used to Cadillac for funerals. So, you know, he always had one, and there was always a picture of him standing next to the Cadillac every year when he got a new one. So my parents were pretty strict. It was like I was living in the attic of a North Philly retreat. I mean, I was in the heart of North Philadelphia, 13th and Lehigh. And I had friends all over the neighborhood. But my brother and I had a time schedule for coming in. And they were pretty strict. If you weren't racing to get home by 9 o'clock. So, but I had a lot of friends. We grew up and we weren't far from Zion Baptist Church, which was Reverend Leon Sullivan's church. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of activities like OIC. I don't know if you're familiar with the OIC. Oh my gosh. It's a historic thing in Philadelphia, but Opportunity Industrialization Center. So that was an organization that Reverend Sullivan started and the church participated in. So I throw that in because I think it gave me a background for civic service. And there were several different areas where they had the OIC offices, and they taught people different jobs and help them get jobs and trades. And my father was the head of recruitment, I believe. So I remember my cellar being full of like 1,000 canisters, and we had to glue on the canisters OIC. So they would take out and people would donate money, and it eventually became a rather big organization at Green and Coulter was one of the locations. I don't think it's there anymore, but so I had a full paid scholarship. There were 2 scholarships given at my school at Kensington High School for University of Pennsylvania, and neither one of us took the scholarship. So I don't know if the following year, if they offered it to them. I felt bad about that, but I didn't want to stay at home. I wanted to go away to college. I wanted that experience and the freedom of being on my own and going. So I thought Penn State would be a good choice. I did get a partial scholarship to go there. So I was excited because I thought it was state university. So it was going to be diverse, and I knew it had a large population. So I was excited about going.
So did anyone else in your family attend a university that kind of gave you the desire to want to go to college? I know that you got a scholarship to UPenn, and I know, that kind of would be a reason to go to college, but were your parents, being that they were strict, kind of pushing you towards college or pushing you into a specific vocational field?
It was always assumed that I was going to college. I mean, it was never, because I always made good grades coming up in school. So they definitely were pushing for me to go to school. And my younger brother, they wanted him to go too. I'm trying to think if I don't think he did. I think he ended up going in the service. But yeah, it was always assumed that I would go. They weren't pushing me in any particular direction. I'm trying to think if they wanted me to be a funeral director. Maybe, I don't know. But I definitely wasn't thinking about that. I think I wanted to be a teacher back then. Now that I think about it, I remember where I used to have my dolls lined up in my room, and I used to give each one of them a piece of paper. Of course, they all had names, and I would go to each doll and fill out the piece of paper with whatever work we had. So I think I really wanted to be a teacher, and during my life, a lot of people would say, "Are you a school teacher?" Because I guess I was kind of teacher-ish, whatever that is. So, but I maybe I did end up being a teacher in one aspect, but not in a formal school situation. So, anyway.
So prior to attending Penn State, because we are going to jump there in a second, did you experience any discrimination in your high school, or any discrimination, being that you were involved in civic duty at a young age, when you were going around passing out those mailing leafs and you were filing papers? Like, did you experience any discrimination in a way where you felt that, oh, like, I can't do this, or just kind of the experiences of what was going on at the time? Did you have any of those personal experiences of discrimination?
Well, my father was very aware. He was, I guess, because he wanted to start a business, but he just really felt strongly about Black people moving ahead, a Black businessman. And so he had a lot of very specific feelings about our people as it relates to this country. I've gone out to dinner several times with him and the family on family occasions like birthdays or something like that, where my father cursed the people out because we waited and didn't get seated before some people got seated before us who were a different persuasion, and he didn't stand for that at all. So I heard him cussing and talking about our rights ever since I was little. And also, he was involved with the Democratic Party. He went to try to get some kind of zoning thing for the business, and he couldn't get it. And so he switched to the Republican Party. And a lot of people were on our case. You're a Republican? He said, I almost said a bad word, but he said, expletive, neither one of them are doing any good for us. So they coddled him, they hand carried him, because there were hardly any Black people back in the day. But it gave him some kind of political power back then. So it was interesting. He wanted me to run for state representative one time. And I was like, no. He was hot. He wanted me to run. He said, you'd be great. And I guess there weren't many women. There weren't many Black women. But now that I think about it, he was a social, when Nkrumah from Nigeria, from Ghana, came to Philadelphia, he was part of the welcoming committee because he came to speak at Zion Baptist Church, once again, Reverend Sullivan. So my father was involved in that, so I got to meet him and be up close to him. So, I mean, thinking back on things, I had a lot of things, I guess, kind of steered me in a certain direction and make me think about our life, our struggle, our relationship to Africa. So there were a lot of things which at first I didn't think about, but then when I thought about the project, I saw that there were quite a few things that kind of were steering me in a certain direction. I think somebody's getting ready to come in the door.
Hold it. All right, so when you got to Penn State, you said you started Penn State, it was fall 1966, or right. Was that summer? Because I know they had quarterly.
That was summer semester.
66. So what was it like when you got to campus? I also know that you mentioned in the first time we talked, it was 2 days until you saw a person of color. So what was that experience like, and how was that different for you? Like, how did you find an adjustment or an adaptivity to what you thought to be diverse when you applied and you wanted to attend the university, to when you came and you realized, you know, I don't see many people who look like me or who can relate with me?
You know, when I first talked to you about that, I said 2 days, but I think it was more like 5 days, because I said it wasn't that short. I went all this time and I was in East Halls, which is a remote, well, it was a remote part of the campus. Now I think everything's grown into East Halls, but if they weren't even finished building it at the time. But I would go to class and it was crazy because all these classes were huge. I'd never been in a class that size. Well, I can't say that because I went to Drexel, was it Drexel? Drexel, one summer I was in a special program and there were like 200 people in the class, and I would get lost every Saturday trying to find the room, the building, the room. And by the time I got there, the class was half over. But anyway, it was crazy. I forgot what I was saying, but what was the question?
Being that it was 5 days, no, you're right.
Right, Marguerite Willis, I'll never forget her. We saw each other. I was walking down to go to class. She was walking somewhere, and we saw each other, and we ran to each other and hugged. She was a total stranger to me, but she hadn't seen anybody in that whole time. I was shocked. I mean, I thought that a state school would have, plenty of Black kids, white kids, Latino, whatever, that there would be a lot of diversity, and there wasn't. It was a scary situation at points because when I went in the dining hall, it was like E.F. Hutton. I came in, everybody stopped eating, everybody stared at me. I got my food, and I was, even though I had been involved in a lot of stuff, like I said, I had a sheltered background. I was nervous. I didn't expect that. And after a while, I stopped taking my meals in the dining hall because all that scrutiny was too much. It was just too much. It was so unexpected.
So in that instant, did, being when you walked into the cafeteria and, all eyes are on you, did it ever make you feel as if you didn't belong? Or did you know, due to your, growing up in your background, that I belong here, like just as much as you belong here, I also belong at this university because I worked hard to get here. I'm paying to be here, and I'm probably just as smart or even smarter than you to, and yeah, smart, smarter than you. So I do belong here. I have a right to be here, knowing that your dad also echoed, over the course of your life, the rights that you have.
I never felt that I didn't have the right to be there. I always felt like that was their personal problem, because I never did anything to anybody, and I never felt hatred towards people. I never felt like, oh, because you're white, I don't like you. Because I had some close friends in high school that were Caucasian, and they were just friends. So, but it was the first time I really realized that people could hate me for being Black to that extent. And then I later found out that Center County in Pennsylvania is the heart of the Klan here in the state. So that's where University Park is. Not, this town is State College, but it's in Center County. And there was a lot of racism in the town. There were people that went to school from Altoona, Pennsylvania, which isn't too far from Penn State. I think between Penn State and Pittsburgh. And they remember people being lynched in their town. These are people that went to school with me. So the level of hatred was shocking. It was shocking. I mean, I got little, people call me names and, gave me dirty looks, but I never had it to the extent that I did when I went to Penn State.
So, so let me backtrack a little bit. What did you end up majoring in? Like, what did you decide to major in? And how did you make your decision on picking your major?
Well, I always liked math. I thought I was a math whiz. And in school, like I said, I got great grades, no problem. So I decided to be a math major. I was going to teach math. So my first class was calculus, the first math class. Child, everybody came in there. First of all, it was almost all men. There were very few women, and they came to the first class with a calculator. Not a calculator. What do you call them? Oh, anyway, they knew that they were coming to do calculations. I was like, huh? I don't think I ever took calculus at high school. At geometry, algebra, but never calculus. So a math major that hadn't taken calculus was, ooh. So my math book was like another language. So I got some counseling, some tutoring for somebody to try to help me with calculus, but it was a nightmare. When I came into class, I never knew what the teacher was saying. So by halfway there, my book went under the bed and I never pulled it back out again. So I flunked it, of course. So, and then I was into the college experience a little bit. So I was going to frat parties and I was, I met the other Black students there, and the Greek life was big back then because that's where the Black students went to kind of fellowship. So I flunked it one time. My parents were like, you flunked? So they thought I was partying. I was doing a little partying, but not like a ton. So anyway, I took it again, flunked it again. So I said, this is not for me. So then I decided to be a Spanish major because I did well in Spanish in high school. And I said, oh, I'll teach Spanish. So I did pretty good as a Spanish major, but I could read it, but I couldn't speak it. And somehow I managed to hide behind people and get away with it. So I ended up in an upper level Spanish class and still couldn't speak it, but there was like 10 people in there. So, you couldn't dodge it too much then. So then my grades started going down. And by that time, I was a militant civil rights worker. So that was my main focus, not studying. So my grades were not too good.
So after your I guess your freshman year, going into your sophomore year, when did you begin to get, really involved in student activism? And you said, you mentioned the militant, you began to participate in militant forms of activism. So when did that start, and how did you get involved? Was it through, joining sorority or fraternity? Or you didn't join a fraternity, but just that social aspect, or when did you kind of find your footing in student activism at Penn State? And maybe another question to add on that, so hopefully you can answer them both in one. But what was one of the things that kind of triggered you to get involved? Was it the moment when you were in the cafeteria when you realized that people, there was so much hatred toward you just because of your race? Or was it another instance of discrimination that you experienced that caused you to kind of say, no, I have to get involved, and demand what the rights that other students have, or the opportunities that other students have that I'm not receiving?
I think it was the sign of the times. There were a lot of things going on. I remember Kent State, where they actually killed students. I remember SNCC was very active back then, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. There was a lot of things going on within the country. And as Black students, we talked, together. And I just felt like that Penn State wasn't fair. I said, here is a beautiful university, a beautiful school, and yet there are hardly, it was less than 1% Black students at Penn State. And I just felt it was wrong, and there were other like-minded students. And we would talk about it, and I guess that's how the Frederick Douglass Association came about. I don't remember any one specific thing, but I remember it was in the air. It was a time for change. It's similar to now, but there weren't as many white folks involved as there are now. But it was a time for change, and it was a time where people felt, they came out and they said, we need to represent our folks. We need to have fair representation at Penn State. And so we kept talking about it, and that's how it kind of evolved.
So I want to hit on the Douglass Association.
Sure.
The Douglass Association, I think, formed in 1968, around 1969, which is after MLK Jr. was assassinated. And what need did students, or after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., how was the campus environment? And noting that the Douglass Association had, kind of come about in those in between years after his assassination, how did that kind of activate or ignite more student activism for you to just say, oh, no, we're going to come to the university with 13 demands. One of the demands is creating a building with commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for students to, be able to, for African-American students to be able to come to, and just kind of like a student center for African-American students. So how did that kind of shift the climate on the campus, which kind of, again, ignited students to, well, not students, but African-American students to take action, no longer sit or no longer, kind of be a little hesitant on making their requests known to the university?
It definitely raised the stakes. I remember I cut my hair in a natural hairstyle when he was murdered, and I sent a letter home to my parents saying, that I had a natural. And I wrote on the envelope around the edges, "This above all to thine own self be true." And my father, later on, I found out my father told my mother, "It was some in here," expletive. He said, "There's something in this envelope." So I thought he would be the one jumping up and down and saying, "Just stick with your studies, don't get involved." But my mother was actually the one that was so upset that I cut my hair, and she said, "You'll never get a job, and nobody will hire you with your hair like that." And it's so crazy because people are still talking about the crown. And 50 years later, people still can't wear cornrows. I mean, there's a lot of negative things about it. And there's one, I don't know if it was California, I don't know, but they passed a Crown Amendment so that people wouldn't have discrimination for wearing their natural hair. So it was crazy because after King died, first of all, I was kind of in between him and Malcolm X. I respected very much the nonviolent cause of Martin Luther King. I thought it took so much power to be able to stand up. He and John Lewis and all, Ralph Abernathy, all those people stood up and took a head whooping like they did and still stayed positive and peaceful. Mm-hmm. But I also felt like after a certain point, there should be some repercussions for that we shouldn't just stand and take it, that we should dish it out too. But then I thought, okay, I'm gonna go with this peaceful thing. But then when they killed him, it's like, well, obviously they don't want peace. So I had a hard time with that. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Ron Karenga. I mean, I really felt that that it wasn't fair for them to take a beating and not, you know, at least self-defense, you know, not to initiate any violence, but at least defend yourself. So when they killed King, I was kind of, the peace movement was, I don't know, that was on the back burner for me.
So, noting that you decided to, you know, kind of take a different approach and, you know, using the term militant lightly, but what was your role in maybe the Douglas Association and the movement in itself, or in protests and in demonstrations? What role did you play in there? And if it was, you know, whether it be, I don't want to say just women, you know, taking notes or writing, you know, the role of an ideal woman within like the civil rights movement or any other, like the Black Panther movement, but what was your role, and were you one of the ones who were on the forefront saying, no, we're going to, you know, really rally against what, you know, the university is doing and make it known that fair treatment is not being offered to African-American students, and we're paying tuition, and, you know, we want the same treatment as, you know, white students. So what was your role in that? And can you describe maybe one or two of the events that you kind of remember that kind of made an impact on you during your time at the university?
Well, as I recall it, there wasn't a division between men and women. I was involved, always involved in helping to bring about the Frederick Douglass Association. And I think it started a little before 68, because I left June of 68 and I came back again a little bit later, but it was already in the process. At least it was in the discussion part. but women were always involved in it. We were, now Carol was saying that we had a women's organization. I don't remember that, but I do remember that we stood up for the brothers and that we wanted to recognize the Black men, and that we saw that Black men were catching it. They were catching it back then, they're catching it now, something terrible. And I felt like as women, we should support the brothers. So I remember we organized something called A Night for Our Kings, and we fed them, and I think we had some entertainment of sorts, but we really like pampered them and told them what they say now, we appreciate you. But it was shocking to a lot of the guys, because, you know, there's always been a negative thing about Black men and all this. But our secretary, Charmaine Matlock Turner, who is, she's big, she was big in she was Roxanne Jones, administrative assistant, and then she worked for Dwight Evans. So she came through just like we came through, but she went into the political arena and the Black United Fund. So she was very active at Penn State, and women always played a part. So I think after I left, there were more of the guys took over, but it wasn't always a popular thing, to put it lightly. Some people thought we were crazy, and I'm talking about Black students. Some people, you know, they wanted to live the good life, and they felt going to college, graduating, getting a good job, all that was important. And I should have paid more attention to my studies, but I felt that was so important, even though my grades were going down the tubes. I felt like somebody had to do it. So there was never a division between the guys and the girls, that we worked together to build something. I remember going to the president's house. Now, I don't remember all the demands. I vaguely remember something about demands, but I remember going in there and everything was glittering. Everything was sparkling. I think he had a chandelier that sparkled and candles that sparkled and all this. And we sat up and talked, but I remember thinking, he's not paying any attention to this, because he was like talking real slow, and the stuff we were saying so fervently, he was like, yeah, right. So it was like they gave us lip service, really. So, but I think women and men played an equal part in bringing that organization together.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned that, you know, you left the university. So what reasons in particular did you leave the university? And then when did you end up coming back to the university? And did you see that there was a difference from when you were there, you know, in your freshman and probably sophomore year, than when you came back to finish on with your school? And did you realize that something had shifted? Maybe the administration, you know, implemented change, or maybe they, you know, were still very resistant?
I left in June of '68. I was pregnant. So I was doing more than just demonstrating, but I was. But so my first husband was also very active. His name was Vince Benson. He was very active in the movement as well. So we left, I got married, I had my son. So I remember he was walking when I came back. So he was born in December of '68. So I think we came back the winter of 68, 69. We might have come back in the end of 69. So when I came back, I wasn't a student, I was a mother. And that kind of, looking back on that, I said, I wish I had gone back to school, but I was busy with my son. And I was still active with the Black Student Union. My husband did go back to classes, and he graduated. So I never graduated from Penn State, but I was still up there. And when I came back, we ended up we got an apartment at State College. So that's when I really got exposed to how the town people felt about students. I never got called the N-word so much in my life. When we used to go food shopping, people would look at us and talk about us. People would call us names. We wouldn't get waited on, properly. It was terrible up there in Center County. So that's when I found out that the Ku Klux Klan's main offices for Pennsylvania were right there in Center County. And those people had a very negative attitude about the students. And I guess they thought we were troublemakers also, the Black students. So it was different. I did see a shift. One of the things we pushed was trying to get recruiters to go out to schools and get Black students, because they said, oh, we don't know where to get Black students from, that whole line, that line. So we said, well, hire somebody to find Black students in if you can. So they did have some recruiters, and it became more popular back then to be involved in the struggle. So there were more students. Some students I was surprised that wouldn't even no, don't say Black. What were we? Afro-Americans, color, we had different names going down the line. But so a lot more people were active than when I left. A lot more people were concerned and felt the need to build something at Penn State. So that there was a shift. There was a shift. There still weren't that many more students, but there was a little teeny shift.
Yeah. So outside of being involved, we're going to jump a little bit from student activism into some social life aspects at Penn State, because you were still a student, and you still were young, full of youth. So what other activities were you a part of, at Penn State? I know you joined a sorority, so you can mention, just even your experience about, your time in the sorority, and how that kind of made your college experience a little bit, or maybe a lot better in terms of, finding family, finding a place where you can be comfortable, finding a place where, there's other people who can relate with you, and not just feeling like an outsider in so many different areas. So,
well, being a part of the Greek life was almost essential up there. There are always people that didn't want to belong to fraternities and sororities, independent people. But the whole social thing of Black students a lot of it was Greek life, because in the dorms, we got to live together in a separate place. So it was a coming together of people. The guys would live in the fraternity houses, and so there was the Kappas, the Qs, and the Alphas. I don't think the Zetas had a space when I was up there. When I came back, maybe they did, but the AKAs were in one dorm, and the Deltas were in Simmons Hall, and that's what I had. That's what I pledged. So yeah, it was
the best sorority ever.
Huh?
I said the best sorority ever.
That's right. So, and it was crazy. If you speak to any people back there, my son grew up in the Delta suite. He learned to walk in the Delta Suite. Oh yeah, so let me see. He was 9 months old when he started walking. So I had to be back there. Maybe I was back there at the beginning of 69. Yeah, because he was 9 months old. He was walking in the Delta Suite. He was everybody's baby. He wore handmade dashikis. I used to sew his little dashikis, and he was power to the people. He's still right on. So, but that it was Greek life was, it wasn't just about fraternities and sororities. It was about being together, finding a place, like you said, a place that was home, place that where you belonged. And it was interesting because there were people there from Philadelphia, from Pittsburgh, and other cities, but we got to know the Pittsburgh Black folks and they got to know the Philly Black folks. So we came together and we had social events at the Q House, at the Kappa House. I think Carol was on the Kappa court, I think. I don't know if she mentioned it, but I throw it in there. She was a glamour girl back then. But so Greek life was important to us. It really was. And the people that weren't in the fraternities and sororities didn't have the same kind of connection. So you would see them in the dorms, you would see them in classes, but a lot of times those people didn't really hang with the Black folks. So they were kind of separate. And I saw something that was mentioned about Black people living in North Halls. That's where they put the football students. So there was Lydell Mitchell, and there were some great football players that came from Penn State around the same time I was there. Harris. I mean, big name people that eventually became great football players came from Penn State. And they did house them in North Halls, which was kind of separate from the rest of the students. They had all the white girls they wanted. They bought them cars. I mean, they carried them around on a silver. I'm telling you the truth, y'all. They carried them around in a silver platter. And they were separate from us, but we saw them. We saw them at games. Some people, I guess the brothers probably knew them a little bit, but they lived in North Hall. So they were groups separate to themselves. But yeah, the social aspect, that's all I did that was social, that and the Black Student Union. So
do you remember the arts festival, which was May 68 and 60, May 69, sorry.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what was that experience like, noting that Black culture was so important for students and just for African-American students to have established on the university campus? So bringing in poets, bringing in musicians, bringing in state representatives, how important was that for the campus, and what did that kind of bring to the campus at that time, or even for the community, the town in itself?
The campus didn't give a hot darn. They could care less. We had a big concert with James Brown. Nobody came but us, just about. And he was very popular back then, but like I said, the racism was strong. It was very strong. So the Black Arts Festival, we had not Nikki Giovanni. I just saw her too. She had twins. The poet Sonia Sanchez. Sonia Sanchez was a young girl back then. She came up. A lot of people came up because we asked them to, for little to nothing as far as honorarium. And they were available for the whole student population, but the whole student population didn't accept them. They didn't appreciate it. They didn't come out, but the Black students came out, and I think it gave people a boost as far as a sense of pride that we carried this out, we did it, and even though they didn't attend, we attended. And I think people got a lot of good information and felt that was another bonding experience. So that and the montage, we put on a montage, which I directed. I think I directed it. I don't remember. I know it was a part of it. And it was a theater in the round, which is something they hadn't really done that much in the country. So we had a theater in the round. We had students sitting in the audience. And as they participated, they would stand up, come down into the center, or else do their poem or whatever they were, whatever their participation was, standing at their seats. So I remember we had a choir. We did a gospel, one or two gospel songs. So it was a unifying experience for us. There were a few white students that came out, but basically it was for us.
And noting that that unity was a necessary aspect into all students' life, or all student life at the time at Penn State, noting that it was necessary for especially African American students at the time to have that unification and the celebration of, Black culture and what that was like, since, as you mentioned, there was some, I don't want to say some, but resistance from administration. There was resistance from people in Center County, people like the people who you lived around, the people in your community. So noting that unity was necessary for African Americans to even, I want to say survival for many students, but a survival mechanism, even living in that town, as you mentioned, like being on the outskirts and knowing what it was like to not just be a student, but also be a member of a community where you still feel on the outskirts and you're still feeling that hatred, directed towards you. So I do have one more, question in pertaining to Penn State, or your time at Penn State. Then we're going to just kind of negate to some closing questions that I have for you. But how long did you end up staying in State College, and did you end up getting involved in any form of activism groups outside of the university, since you did live in the community? So NAACP or any other formal civil rights group?
I'm trying to think. One of my good friends, who was also a Delta, her mother was a big organizer and leader here in Philly for the NAACP. So I think we all joined. One year we all joined as support for her and support for the organization. Other than the Black Student Union, I really wasn't involved in any other activities, because I was a housewife and a mother. So from that and doing the things that I did do with the school, I really didn't have time for other stuff. So I didn't have any other social activities. I'm trying to think. No, I don't think so. I did stuff when I came back to Philly, but up there, no.
Okay, so just transitioning into some lifetime memories and just your legacy that the legacy that you participated in at being a student at Penn State, and also not being a student at Penn State. What legacy do you think that you left at Penn State? And I'll share what legacy I think that you played a part in leaving at Penn State. But in your view, how did being involved in the Douglass Association, how did being involved with the Black Student Union, how did going to the president's office or house and sitting with him and dining with him, and even how did leaving Penn State and then coming back to the town kind of set you up to leave a legacy, leave a mark at the university and even in the community outside of the university?
I guess I never thought about leaving a mark. I thought about being a productive person. I thought about doing something to help my people. So I guess we wanted to recruit more students. That was one of our main goals. So I guess there are a few more students up there. I think it's
Yeah.
still an issue. Just like systemic racism is not being addressed. It's still a problem. It's a big problem, but I guess I I left that as far as encouraging people to struggle, to keep on moving forward, to understand their history and understand that they play a vital part in changing things, and that things aren't going to change unless we get involved in it. So if I think about anything, back then I was a kid, I didn't think about legacy and what was my mark. I just thought I was doing the right thing back then. Looking back on it now, I'm proud of the fact that I was involved. It also led to me being involved in the National Association of Black Students, which was an organization that I belonged to with my first husband in Washington, D.C. And I met a lot of students through that. And I guess I wouldn't have been involved in that organization if I hadn't been active at Penn State. So it kind of led me into participating in a more national level. And I have friends now that I met back then, 40 years ago. So I guess that's what you call a mark. I don't know.
Yeah, no, through your civic engagement as a student at Penn State, and even outside of being a student at Penn State, it allowed, even for myself, to be a beneficiary of the new opportunities that came about from the struggle and the suffering that you guys, as in students, African American students, had to face, to demand certain rights, to demand more students of color, to demand Black studies courses, and to demand a African American student center or a multicultural center for minority students. Those things now exist at the university. So just even noting that I, being a beneficiary of, your involvement with the Black Student Union, your determination to do what was right, like you said, doing what was right, what you believe was right at the time, even though not really, maybe not knowing or thinking in the future of what may come to be about it through your service. But now looking back, as you said, noting that other students and other young women have the opportunity to benefit from your suffering and your struggle. So I do have two more questions I can say. Did you ever return, back to Penn State any years immediately following your time after leaving, or did you come back years later? And why, if you did come back, or if you didn't come back, why?
I never go back. I know a lot of my friends went back. There were different meetings of Epsilon Gamma, which was the Delta chapter up there. So a lot of people went up there. I heard about how much it had changed. And I was going to go up a couple times, but I think I had a conflict, so I never actually got up there. So I have never been back since I left, ever been back. So I guess maybe one day I'll try, or I'll go up. Maybe one of my grandkids will go up there and I'll take the trip with them. But no, I haven't gone back. Have never gone back.
Hey, wow. But yeah, there's still an opportunity for you to go back. Maybe
Sure.
with this project, I'll be able to get you back on campus or something. Maybe there's a possibility here of getting you back. But
I might go back. I'm glad that I have met you and to look in your face and think about the things that we did and to see the generations. I mean, that makes my heart very happy. It does. I'm glad that people benefited from it. And that's why I agreed to do this, because I want to keep participating, you know, I want to keep contributing. I still think I have plenty to give. And I'm proud of the students that have gone there and that have continued to do things like you. And I'm happy to hear that, you know, you did take up the mantle and continue to struggle.
Yes. You know, I think even in, I do have one more question, but I'll say this before I ask a question. Even in hearing you speak with me or sit down and do this interview, that is still, you know, passing on the mantle. That's still being active in, you know, sharing with generations that, you know, came after you, what it was like, and kind of giving direction on how do you go about, you know, activism, or these are some things that, you know, we did and this is how it worked, or these are some things that I noticed that I've been able to be a part of, and this was what the outcome, you know, was. So even in sharing that wisdom and passing down information and even sharing your story is beneficial to generations to come, and is still passing forth the mantle. So the last question I have for you to wrap up our interview is, if you would summarize your college experience in one phrase or even one word, what would it be and why?
I would say education, and not necessarily book learning, but education in life. Growth. I experienced a lot of growth. As I told you before, I was kind of sheltered when I grew up. I loved reading because I couldn't really get out there that much. So I read a lot. I read a lot of times, I read things I didn't even know what I was reading, but I could pick out phrases. Like I had a subscription to Scientific American, and I was 12 years old. So half of the stuff in there, I had no clue what it was, but I always liked to read something that I never saw before and see if I could pick out information. And I think education is important to me. I got a great education at Penn State. It wasn't calculus, woo, it wasn't Spanish, but it was working with people and understanding growth and development. Some of it I didn't always see then, but I see now. So I would say Penn State gave me quite an education. They didn't know it, but they did.
Yeah, and I think what I realized in my time as a college student was sometimes the outward and the outer out of the classroom experiences are the ones that make you more than the ones in the classroom. And as you kind of mentioned, a lot of the experiences that I had at Penn State that taught me different things that, you know, sometimes made me cry, sometimes made me feel, you know, happy, whatever those experiences were. I think those, now looking back, even though I just graduated in May, I can say those experiences were the ones that I'm glad I had, because, you know, there is a real world outside of college. It's not just college, you know, so those experiences that I did have and those experiences that you mentioned you had, they kind of made us into, you know, or helped us become who we are, you know, today. So, you know, Ms. Meryl, I just want to say thank you so much for just taking the time to be interviewed and sharing your story with joy and laughter. I enjoyed it. And, you know, just being able to get a different perspective of not just someone going the straight and narrow, going to college and finishing, but also telling a different story of, I went to college, I didn't finish, but I also gained an education that has still advanced me in life. So thank you so much, Ms. Meryl Lynn Brown, for just taking the time to sit with me and talk and share your story.
I enjoyed it very much. And Maya, I just want to say one more thing about education. I learned that sweet potato pies need eggs in them. We did a fundraiser for the Black Student Union, and that's one thing that the white folks did participate in, because we made all these pies. So I was at somebody's apartment off campus, and they let us use their kitchen. So we were making the pies. I had all the ingredients, and we got the pies in the oven. And then I looked over and saw I had all these eggs left. I said, what happened? I never put any eggs in the recipe. So we took all the pies out of the oven, poured them back into the bowl, added the eggs, put them back in the oven. They turned out fine. But then when we were selling them for a fundraiser, the white folks thought they were not sweet potato pies, pumpkin pies. So they never heard of sweet potato pies before. So it ended up that we said, oh yeah, they're pumpkin pies, because they have similar spices in them. But I did learn about making pies. So that's why I said education. I got an education. But I did learn a lot, and I appreciate you coming to me and being able to tell a little bit about our stories as students up there back in the 60s. So I can't lie too much about my age, because I was going to college back then. So, but it was a great experience and all. And some of those friends I still have at this 50 years later. So it was a great experience. So thank you so much for asking me, and for asking me the questions and making my brain, oh yeah. And then Carol would say something, and then a couple other people that I guess you'll be talking to or you've already talked to, and it jogged my memory. I said, oh yeah, we did do that, didn't we? So I felt kind of proud about my contribution. So thanks again.
Yes, of course.